It's August 13th, 1913, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
So it was on this day that something probably didn't happen. A man calling himself Hallam Adine did probably not travel to Albania. He was probably not pronounced king upon arrival. He then probably did not enjoy the benefit of a harem, and then he probably did not declare war on Montenegro and get discovered 5 days later to be an imposter. But that didn't stop a man called Otto Witte probably pretending to be that imposter for many years afterwards. Are you keeping up?
So this man, Otto Witte, was a German circus performer and a showman. He claimed to have been in the circus since the age of 8, which, given that, we're talking about the late 1800s, is probably plausible. Somewhat less plausibly, he also claimed he was kidnapped in the Balkans. He escaped via Africa. He claimed he'd been recruited into the Ottoman Secret Service. Then, crucially, he also claimed that when Albania declared independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1913, he said that the country's Muslims wanted the Sultan's nephew, Hallam Adine, to become their king, and he noticed that he resembled said Adine and travelled to Albania and successfully convinced the people there that he was their rightful king. The crucial factor in this is that there is no Hallam Adine. The Sultan did not have a nephew by that name. He did have a son who was offered the throne of Albania and declined it, which is probably where the root of the whole story lies.
And I think it's worth us continuing as if the story is true because it's got so many wonderful details. And,
this is how fake news happens.
But I mean, the story that he resolved had, as Olly mentioned, has him take command of this harem of 25 women having turned up in his military regalia and bedazzled the local troops and got them to swear allegiance to him. And it sounds like this absolutely fantastic story that you can really get into as a listener if you're hearing it. It's just unfortunate that it's all been unpicked and unstitched in the years since, and we now know that he was kind of just a fantasist, really.
Do we definitely know that it definitely didn't happen? I thought what we know is that there's no evidence that it happened, apart from the fact that he went on about it for decades afterwards. Although you could say that the fact that he did go on about it for decades afterwards is so insistent that it had happened. It's not evidence that it happened, but you do kind of think, why would you make such a fuss about it if it definitely didn't?
So it was a very chaotic and confusing period in Albanian history. They went through a lot of different regime changes around this time.
They went through a lot of former lion tamers that became their kings for 5 days.
There was a lot of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Man, those harem girls must have been really knackered.
Exhausting.
So, I mean, against that backdrop, it was easy for Witte to kind of insert himself into this confusing narrative. But obviously, we're talking about 1913, not, the 1500s. If this had actually happened, an Albanian might have made note of the fact that they had a new king and that he was only in post for 5 days before running away with their treasury.
Well, the Witte apologists would say, but the Albanians had reason to make it seem like this was something that didn't happen because it's such an embarrassment of a story if you just accept this, circus performer as your ruler.
And it's now thought that Witte was probably afflicted with pseudologia fantastica, which is a nice way of saying pathological lying. He certainly did seem to believe this. His daughter went by the title of princess. He refused to accept any post that wasn't addressed to the former monarch of Albania. But what I think is really interesting about the story isn't so much whether or not it happened. It was more the fact that he was just humoured by everyone. The Berlin police issued him an ID card that included the words former King of Albania, and the title is on his tombstone.
Yeah, German identity cards aren't a typical forum for light-hearted humour, are they? So I was quite impressed to see that. But I guess he took people in. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? It's strange how this show sometimes juxtaposes characters. And he's not at all like Charles Ponzi because probably he didn't do any of the things he claimed to do, whereas Ponzi actually did make millions of dollars. But in the same way, his force of personality obviously brought people along with him. I mean, as far as I can tell, we only really know that this happened, or rather that it didn't happen, but for years he said that it had happened, because he was such a raconteur that when he died, an obituary was written for him, and it surfaced in Time magazine, and the obituary took his version as gospel, and then people started saying it like it was true. But that's only because people had been visiting him in his old people's home for years and years. Coincidentally, by the way, he died on this same day, the 13th of August, but in the 1950s. People had been taking what he said for years and years as an entertaining story. And then when he died, it got printed up as real because he basically delivered it in such a fun way.
Yeah, and I couldn't decide whether that was because it was a more credulous time or whether Albania wasn't considered a country worthy of fact-checking,
Yes.
in the 1950s. And Witte wrote a couple of memoirs in which he, expanded upon these claims. But what I feel like I did a lot of research. I went down some rabbit holes, and I feel like I've got a feeling for why this whole story was treated with so much tolerance and even amusement by the German population at large. And it lies in the concept of the, might not be saying it right, originale, German for originals, and it's a cultural phenomenon broadly similar to the English eccentric. These are people who are familiar figures in German cities. Often they're peddlers, market traders, street performers, beggars, just the kind of people you see knocking around town a lot. And German Wikipedia includes whole pages for the most famous originale of different cities, and some of them even have their own pages.
And I wonder if that explains Baron Munchausen, who obviously was a fictional character, but he was actually based on a real baron, a guy called Hieronymus Karl Friedrich Freiherr von Munchausen. And he was a noted storyteller who exaggerated his life massively, so much so that he sort of became this fictionalized character. But he claimed that what he was doing was delivering these stories in a way to expose the credulity of the listeners who would believe the marvelous and fantastical things that he was saying in the first place. So he was kind of offended by this character that had been created using his name, because that guy was suffering from pseudologia fantastica or pathological lying, as opposed to what he was, which was this
satire.
kind of raconteur.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was satire.
Do you guys want to hear about some other famous originale in Germany?
Oh, very much. Go.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the likes of Hans Huhr of Leipzig, who is a cinema ice cream seller who became famous for his patter. And when he died, there were obituaries for him in Germany. This was happening, this was in the 20th century, so this is like a long phenomenon. There was Sausage Hans, who was well known for using comic verse to beg for sausages at butcher's shops in Düren. And my
Comic
absolute
verse to
favourite...
beg for verse.
Oh,
that's good.
nice.
That's very good.
Verse for verse.
My absolute favourite was a Magdeburg originale whose name was the Slag Monkey. He was a man who sold fish out of his pockets.
Right.
He sold fish out of his pockets and his nickname was Slag Monkey.
I mean, that sounds funny now, but I feel sorry for anyone who bought the fish. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it's always best on ice,
it doesn't
isn't
be
it?
great.
You look for the ones that look like they've got healthy eyes and don't smell of
It's
fish.
so true.
Definitely
you
not
didn't
out
have
of a
that
weird
much
bloke's
choice back
pockets.
in the day.
Yeah, I don't know.
Also, if you only have time to look at one thing from this whole thing, make it the page of the Cologne originale. It's amazing. There's a fact box on each person, but they're all illustrated with a photo of a very dedicated man who has dressed himself up as each of these people, men and women from across history,
Wow.
with loads of
Who is
circus
himself, I
type
presume,
makeup
therefore, an originale.
Yeah, it's good.
Meta.
It's incredible.
It's also worth noting that Witte isn't the only person to have tried to pass himself off as a royal. And various people have done it unsuccessfully, like a woman named Anna Anderson, who turned up in the 1920s in Berlin claiming to be the Russian princess Anastasia, who had survived the Bolshevik Revolution. But there's a guy called False Dmitri I, who at the very beginning of the 17th century managed to successfully pose as a prince and con his way onto the royal throne of Russia. He first appeared in Poland declaring himself to be Dmitri, the son of the deceased Ivan the Terrible. The real Dmitri had supposedly been assassinated as a boy, but this imposter claimed that he had escaped his would-be murderers, and now he was back to rule the Russian people. And apparently they put him on the throne. He was actually crowned Tsar in July 1605. But his rule was pretty short-lived, and eventually his policies were too radical for the elites of the time, and they assassinated him less than a year later. But someone did it. They actually did it.
Yeah, but could he swallow a sword? Could he tame a lion? Witte could.
Tomorrow.
Because it's always unpleasant to be blindfolded and made to clean a toilet.
Ditch the ads and get a Sunday episode when you join Club Retrospectors. patreon.com/retrospectors.